there, thank you for checking out this edition of R&R's Ask the Expert. Today, Michael Pinto, the CEO of Wonder Makers Environmental, is back. We are bringing forward the coronavirus cleaning topic some more. He did a previous video with R&R about more routine or general cleaning tips for coronavirus. And also we recently did an interview with Anissa about how to handle contents cleaning during the coronavirus pandemic, but that really had more to do with hard contents. So today we're going to dive into the soft contents realm and how you should be handling claims like that, or customers who have soft content that need to be cleaned. So Michael, thank you so much for coming back. Do customers need to be thinking about handling soft contents cleaning for their customers right now?
Well, Michelle, thank you first of all for having me back. This is always a pleasure, and I hope that we can share stuff that your viewers will actually find not only useful but practical in terms of how they're marching through this, as you said, very much unprecedented times. So the question is, should they be considering soft goods as part of this, or should they be deferring this? And my belief is that the restoration industry is so complex and there's so many different things going on that I don't think that we can take a major piece like soft contents off the table just because we're concerned that there's a pandemic or that there might be contamination on the soft contents, or we're not exactly sure how to handle them. I want to make sure that everybody understands that I do believe that this is a significant and a serious issue. I don't want people exposed. I certainly don't want to see the virus spread inappropriately or inadvertently. But I also think that we're restoration professionals and that we can be thinking about this in a reasonable way. And I think it's even more important as we're getting to a point where people are starting to talk about reopening the economies and loosen up the stay-at-home orders and things like that. And as that business increases, there may be months and months that we have to be thinking about potential exposure here. So yes, the big answer to that is that everybody in the restoration industry who, even if you're just handling the soft contents to go to a secondary vendor, you need to be thinking about how to do this and do it carefully.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what are some of the innovative ways that contractors can be cleaning soft contents?
Well, that's the funny thing, is that it's really not much different than what we're doing now. I mean, if you're taking your contents to a dry cleaner, then they're going to a dry cleaner. If you're taking your contents to a laundry facility, or you've got in-house laundry facilities, then you can do that. Of course, Asporta has been a big player in the industry, and that's a different sort of wash system. But to me, it's not so much even the individual chemistries or the wash systems. People are making tweaks on that. We're going to talk about that in just a little bit. But what I'm trying to emphasize here is that the people who are dealing with soft contents, what they need to understand is that it's not really as much the difference in terms of how we're processing the individual items. It's getting them to the processing facility safely, keeping the operator safe while they're doing that work, and then getting them back out in a cleaned format. And quite bluntly, all of those technologies that I talked about, dry cleaning with the right chemistry, laundry with the right chemistry, and certainly Asporta with the right chemistry, all of those are going to be good for soft contents. Now, you do have to remember certain soft contents are going to be better in certain cleaning situations. I don't want to take a bunch of dry cleaning stuff and just throw it in the laundry. I don't want to take a lot of quilted things and put it in a regular laundry or a dry cleaner and think that that's going to get it as effectively clean as putting it in an Asporta. So, I mean, you have to understand the differences in the systems, but in general, for the right soft contents, those different cleaning processes can be effective.
Okay. So talking about the spreading of germs and cross-contamination is something that we really, really want to avoid. What do you recommend for handling the contents themselves to make sure that there's as little to no cross-contamination?
So first of all, I want to say that there are written protocols specifically for how people can set up their soft content processing areas. And I also want to go back to something that Anissa said earlier as a starting comment here. If soft contents isn't your bailiwick right now, I think she used the word lane. If you're not in that lane right now, this is not the time to just add that, okay? So most of the comments from this point forward are assuming that the individuals that are listening to this understand about how to actually process the soft contents, have some, one or more of those systems that we just talked about that are in place. And now they're struggling to say, well, I've got this, but as you just mentioned, how do I get it from point A to point B safely? How do I protect my operators? And then how do I get them back out? And as I said, the good news on that is that there's a full-fledged document that's available free. It was developed, as a paid process, but the idea of taking your standard work area and turning it into something that is suitable to handle potentially COVID contaminated materials is not that difficult for a restoration contractor, quite bluntly. You need to develop an isolated area. So just like you would set up containment barriers and isolation barriers in other people's houses and commercial buildings and stuff, you have to think of your building as a potential contaminated work site that you need to protect. So if you can't establish barriers and create either air scrubbing or negative pressure inside there, then we probably have bigger questions to talk about than what comes next. So there's some diagrams that we've put together. I've got one here that you're going to show that talks about the general equipment and supplies that are necessary. And it's, again, it's isolation barriers, it's your wash system, whatever your wash system is. You do need a HEPA filtered negative air machine, although we're going to use it as an air scrubber primarily. And then, and I don't mean to be controversial here, but I'm just going to give you my best suggestions. I think you need to be proactive too, and we're recommending that people put in hydroxyl radical generators in these contained wash areas. And if you don't mind, I want to take just 30 seconds and explain that decision making. So there's a lot of controversy as to the hydroxyl radical generators and whether they can actually kill the COVID virus. And the fact of the matter is there's a lot of good testing that indicates that it is effective against microorganisms. The difference is that people are trying to push it too far and use it as a disinfecting device. So it's like, oh, we can put it in a room and somehow, that's going to take care of everything that might be in that room. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about using it as an adjunct to your air scrubbers and to offer another level of protection to the people that are in there. So I'm not suggesting that by putting it in, that's going to be the same as if you were going to fog it with an appropriate EPA registered disinfectant or anything like that. But it's something that can be running basically 24/7 and helping you out. And it just helps knock down the amount of microorganisms that are there in the air. So my feeling is it's not harmful in a situation like that, and it could be helpful, so why not use it? It's the technology that we have available. Let's just use it for our own people, to protect our own people. So with that, the basic parameters are going to be this. You're going to set up an isolation area. You're going to take a negative air machine, and we suggest putting a tail on it and swinging that tail, which would be like a plastic lay flat exhaust, and swing that over the top of your machines, and then cut relief vents in that piece of plastic, in that exhaust duct. So basically what you're doing is you're creating a curtain of clean air that's coming down over the front of the machine. Now think about what that's going to do for your operator. We are still going to talk about operators and appropriate personal protective equipment and everything, but that air coming from a HEPA filtered negative air machine, which by the way does capture viruses and stuff, so it's washing over the front of that loading area, whether it be the washer or the dryer, the Asporta, whatever that machine is, so that as that operator is handling the different soft contents and everything, again, they have another measure of protection that's helping keep whatever viral contaminants and stuff away from them. So isolation, we've got the negative air machine set up almost in an air washing fashion. We've got a hydroxyl radical generator just helping to knock down all of the microorganisms over time. So the big thing then is, how do we protect our operators while they're doing that work? And part of that has to happen at the project site, and part of it has to happen at the shop. Let's talk about the shop side first. This is personal protective equipment and cleaning techniques. So we recommend foamers, that you have a small pump up foamer, quart or gallon size, something like that, with your appropriate antimicrobials. And there's all those good ones that are out there that we're familiar with in the industry. But just get one of the antimicrobials that will foam. It can be quaternaries, it can be, I believe even some of the hydrogen peroxide ones will foam. Essential oils style, there's all sorts of them that are out there. Put it in a foamer. The reason we like it in a foamer is because then you can see where you're applying it to the different surfaces. So basically, every time you load or unload the washer or the dryer, the Asporta, the dry cleaning piece of equipment, whatever it is, we want that then to be foamed and wiped down, so that you're removing any sort of, essentially you're cleaning all the touch points on a regular basis, just like CDC and everybody else is telling us that we have to, except in this case, we realize the touch points are the work touch points, not necessarily just light switches and keyboards and stuff like that. So we've got that. We also have wiping claws and things. I personally prefer the microfiber ones. And if they go to that, all of this is, by the way, is, like I said, is in a written document that's available at the asporta.ca website, and they can download that for free. It is specific to having an Asporta machine as the cleaning device, but that really, it's all transferable in terms of other cleaning equipment. It's how you set it up and how you do the cleaning around it and things like that. So then we also have to talk about, if this is really coming from areas that could be COVID contaminated, then we want our operators and personal protective equipment. And I want to pause there for a minute and say, this has been a problem of mine for a while, because I don't think that there's enough appreciation in the industry for the other contaminants that are being processed through some of these laundry facilities and soft content facilities. If you're bringing in water damaged materials from category 3 water loss that might have sewage, if you're bringing in mold materials, I tell you, I've done a fair amount of work on the smoke and the cancer causing substances that are in smoke and odor residues and stuff like that. To me, being overcautious on these sorts of things would be beneficial. I could potentially see this becoming the standard for soft contents processing way into the future, not just because of the COVID. So the personal protective equipment, a little bit less in some respects than what we're typically used to in terms of putting our field crew in. Not necessarily a full face mask or anything like that, but eye protection, respiratory protection, gloves, and some sort of body covering. The nice thing about it is that if they're processing soft contents, think about going to medical style scrubs and or lab coats rather than disposables all the time. Worst case scenario, you drop a load in with your own materials. So, you know, there's a cost savings there, but more importantly, it makes it more comfortable. People are wearing, you know, suits that aren't, you know, like Tyvek or something like that. Because the reality is, if you're taking the right steps at the job site in terms of packaging the materials, then we're going to minimize any of that potential exposure at the shop. And the personal protective equipment always should be a last line of defense. It's very much, in my thinking as a safety professional, like a seat belt. I always put that seat belt on, and quite bluntly, I pray to God I never have to use it, right? Because that means something bad happened.
Yes.
I think this is exactly the same thing with our personal protective equipment. It's the seat belt of the soft contents operators. So put it on, use it right, train your people, make sure they're fit tested, all of that. But face shields, N95s, N100s, a lot more comfortable. And that's primarily while they're doing the loading and the unloading. So then that brings us to what happens out on the job site. And there's another diagram that's out there that talks about the way to process that. What doesn't get used enough, in my opinion, in these sorts of situations are the water-soluble bags. So this is very key in my mind, is that on the job site, you have people, the field crew, they're in their personal protective equipment, they're protected, they're taking these soft contents that might be contaminated. I don't want to contaminate the truck. I don't want to contaminate the van. I don't want to contaminate the cart that moves them from the van to the wash area, whatever that may be. And so, you know, how do we do that? And then how do we protect the operators? And the key in my mind is water-soluble bags. These are used very much in the industry for forensic restoration, for you know, bloodborne pathogens and that sort of stuff. Hospitals use them all the time. They're not that expensive. You load them into the water-soluble bags first, and then into a secondary heavier bag. We would recommend for soft contents that they use clear disposal bags rather than black ones, for two reasons. One, you can actually see what's inside, and then you know, that allows the operator to at least have a little bit better heads up in terms of what might be coming at them. The other thing that does for them is if they set it up on the job site where the dark bags or black bags or something are for garbage and the clear bags are for contents, you have less risk of throwing away contents that should have ended up at the shop, and or someone opening up stuff to put in the washer and then finding out that it's garbage instead of contents. So water-soluble bags first, into the covering bag. Depending on the environment, those may need to be wiped down. We also recommend in a situation like that using zip ties on the tops rather than tape, because then they get to the shop and then the tape gets so difficult in terms of getting into the bags and everything. So zip ties, and if you're really cool, you can order the ones that are releasable zip ties, so you can tighten them up, and then you just pull the little lever, push the little lever, and they loosen back up. So once they're in the shop, they get, you know, carefully moved into that isolated area. The operator has their personal protective equipment on. They kind of sort out what they're going to load into their various pieces of equipment, and then you know, should go into the water-soluble bags. I will be honest with you, I don't have an understanding of how the water-soluble bags might work on the dry cleaning side. So it probably depends on what chemistry they're using and whether that's going to screw up their solvents. But you know, that would be something, if somebody has a question, they can always call me. We can work that one out together, because I just thought of it now. But on the laundry side, we should be pretty good. It goes right in. These there's both cold water and hot water self-dissolving bags. They go in, and then once the process is started, if it's a machine like an Esporta, it's got like a gasket seal on it, whereas a washing machine side loads sometimes have gaskets on them and stuff. But if it's a top load with a lid, we would recommend taking a piece of painter's tape and running it on the seam there. So as that machine is running, there isn't you know, an air movement between the inside of the drum, even though it's in the water and everything. So just different ways to think it through. But the idea is just, how do we keep it segregated when we're there, get it to the shop, get the person who's handling it and getting it loaded into the machine safely. At that point, you just have to make sure your chemistry is right so that there's some antimicrobials in there. Quite bluntly, the coronavirus is pretty easy to kill. Actually, you're supposed to say deactivate because it's a virus, but it's pretty easy to take care of. So there's a lot of chemistries that will work, but that's going to be the process. So then when it comes out, and while it's running, I think I mentioned this, but while it's running, we're using our foamer and we're using our cleaners to clean all those touch points again, including maybe the table that's next to it where you're processing the laundry and everything. Then when it comes out, put it in your tub to move it to the dryer, which has also been wiped out and cleaned and everything. So it's all about just being really meticulous and almost OCD about doing your cleaning and stuff. So.
Okay, so that was a lot of things to do. So on the soft content side of things, what are some no-nos when it comes to handling those contents?
Well, I think the big no-nos, again, we talked about the one, which is if you're not already skilled in soft contents, this is not the time for you to become skilled in necessarily. Now, it doesn't mean that people can't get into it. I mean, in some respects, it would make sense if you were going to add it right, instead of building temporary barriers and stuff, build a isolated workspace for your laundry and make it in such a fashion that you have gasketed doors instead of just regular doors and things like that. So yeah, there's an aspect where you could build it up, but I'm just saying from an operator standpoint, it might be a lot to think about in terms of building it all at the same time. So my general advice would be, unless you're really skillful and really want to spend a lot of time working through the details, I would just be careful and potentially avoid adding this as an adjunct right now. The other big no-no would be to somehow get to the point where you think, he just mentioned all that stuff. What a bunch of hooey. No one's going to do that. He's over the top. It's not that bad. That attitude is actually going to get some people hurt. And for the people who think that everything that I just shared with you there is that somehow that's over the top or that's not going to be practical or anything like that, that is. And you're going to see the industry moving to that, as I said, not just because of the COVID, because COVID is getting people to think about what are we doing every day in ways that we have to do different to protect ourselves. I mean, if you think about it, we actually have people who now know how to wash their hands. People now know that they're supposed to be using sanitizers. How many people knew about touch points in the general public, 4 months ago? Yet how many people know about it now? And so for the folks that are in the industry that are sitting here saying, well, Michael, that's really nice, but, I thought you were going to talk practical stuff. This is practical. This is what people are going to be doing for the COVID and into the future.
Perfect. Okay. So we've talked about the pack out process and the cleaning process a little bit. So I know that this is a little bit different than if you're returning like hard goods to a facility or home or whatever, but what are some tips for returning soft contents once they're cleaned, returning them back to where they came from, returning them to the customer safely?
Absolutely. So the first thing that needs, in my opinion, is that you have to really share the information. So if you're taking soft contents off the property site and they may not be there, they may not see that process, and then all of a sudden they return in boxes and hopefully they're dried and cleaned and folded, that's great. But because of the COVID and because people's concerns and everything, you do need to communicate to your clients. This went through a very specific process. Here's how we did it. This is how we protected not just your contents, but our people. Then, share with them that the hot water, if it is a the chemistry that you're using, some of those sorts of things that are shown to kill the COVID. Right now, there isn't a lot of great testing or anything that we can do afterwards. They're just getting to the point where some of the environmental testing for the SARS-CoV-2 virus is becoming practical. But the other thing that we have to rely on is that the CDC has done a fair amount of testing because of all the hospital laundry and everything. And they are very clear in their directions that both the hot water wash and the hot drying is enough to take care of the COVID. They're even telling people that they can do that at their own house and do it that way. So again, over communicate to your clients, tell them what your process is, link to some of those CDC documents that talk about cleaning laundry appropriately. Download that procedure is so that they can see. I mean, it's like 6 pages long, 5.5 or 6 pages long. Let them know this is, I mean, we're serious about this. And then make sure that none of that matters, quite honestly, if you take back crappy contents. If you don't do what you're supposed to do, if you don't clean it, if it doesn't look clean, and quite honestly, if it doesn't smell clean, everything that you just said is out the window, because they're going to open up that box or that bag or that package or whatever it is, and they're going to say to themselves, it's wrinkled, it's stained, it's, the color's bled, whatever. You just have to put on your customer service cap at that point.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so talking about customer service cap here, what kinds of businesses or organizations, for the companies that already have their soft contents line set up and are prepared to do this, what kinds of businesses and organizations could be really in need of services like this right now? Or as we move forward, school year starts back up maybe in the fall, things like that, there's going to be, I think, probably a lot of people that will need services like this.
So that's a great question. So the first thing is that you have to understand that this is the primary market is your standard market. So if you've already got water loss contents, or you've got mold contaminated contents, smoke damage contents, we're just dealing with that from the standpoint of we have to be careful because of the extra risk potentially from the COVID virus. So you don't want to give up on that. Now, as far as specialty services and other market avenues for you, absolutely right. Think about this. As all of the restaurants start to slowly open up and everything, and yes, they have a laundry service, and yes, all those people are going to want to do that, but are they? Is your standard industrial laundry facility going to have a process like that to protect their people? Are they going to be open to be able to handle this? So just even asking around. Schools are another one, because they don't have laundry services typically, and yet they have all these soft contents. Virtually every elementary classroom that I know, the teacher has clothes in there for when one of the little kids gets sick or has a little potty accident or something like that. It's all been sitting in the school. Do they want to just open the doors and come back and say, okay, we're good? Or some of the school districts going to say, you know what, we need to do some internal cleaning. And so as they hire the restoration contractor to come out and do the internal cleaning, rather than just do the surfaces and the applying of the disinfectants and stuff, they should talk to them about the soft contents. Do you want us to clean any of this? We have a process for that. The other ones, of course, is the medical facilities. They tend to have, again, the commercial laundry people that work with them on those sorts of things, but it would be interesting to nose around and just see if those laundry people are prepared. Maybe you can provide a secondary service to the laundry people.
Perfect. Okay. All right. Michael, anything else that we did not cover that you want to cover?
I just want to say thank you again, and remind people that, we have to understand that we're the professionals in the industry. If we're not going to help the people who need help, whether it be with the surface cleaning or the applying of the disinfectants, the soft contents, the hard contents. If we're not going to help them, somebody else will. And those somebody else's are not going to do it as well as we do. And we just have to be proud of the fact that we know what we're doing. We can take these steps. We can protect ourselves. We can help people. But we have to want to do it, and we have to want to do it right. So it's my final word. Be the heroes, but make sure you're not hurting your own people as we're heroes to others.
Perfect. All right. Thank you, Michael. And thank you to everyone who is watching this. There are a variety of resources on our website, rnrmagonline.com. The Restoration Industry Association and IICRC have also been working closely to develop some really good resources for contractors. So be sure to check those out. There are links to those on our website as well. Thank you, Michael. See you again soon.
God bless you. Thank you, Michelle.